Good evening, everyone. My name is Ingrid Boudet, and I'm founder of No More Noise Toronto. And I have the real pleasure of introducing two people who are going to join me here tonight. And Dr. Arline Bronzaft, Professor Emerita from the City University of New York, who has been a pioneer in noise reduction for decades, is joining us tonight. And also we have Dr. Tor Oiamo from our own Toronto Metropolitan University. And he is a PhD, Associate Professor, Exposure Science and Environmental Health Research Group from Toronto Metropolitan University. So welcome and thank you to you both for coming today. I'm going to start sharing my screen. And I just need to remember now. I'm going to do this one and share sound. Okay, here we go. So, welcome. Couple things with housekeeping. So your cameras are off, microphones are muted, the chat is open. I encourage you to share information in there, and the Q&A is also enabled. I do have someone who is going to be looking at those questions as they come in, possibly grouping them, and we hope to have some time for Q&A at the end. Order of events, I'm going to talk a little bit about No More Noise Toronto, and then Dr. Bronzaft's going to speak for a few minutes, then Dr. Oiamo, then we're going to have a panel discussion, and then we're going to talk about next steps here in Toronto because our noise bylaws are under review, and then we're going to go to some Q&A. And I do want to do a little bit of a land acknowledgement, and I want to highlight this book because it talks about both the future and the history of our relationship to sound and how we use sound. The indigenous peoples of this land were very good listeners and actually knew more about the environment than colonial settlers gave them credit for. And that is spoken about a lot in this book. So I just hope that we may all learn from them and their relationship to the land and the sounds of nature. I think we need to get back to that. So I always like to get some participation. So this is called a Mentimeter, and this is a way that I get to hear from you and we get to hear from each other. So you can either open this up on another window on your screen, or you can use your phone with the QR code. And there are 3 questions in this survey, and then we will look at the answers at the end. So the questions are: what is your most annoying noise source? And then you have to answer. And then the second question is, I'm annoyed by noise while I am trying to relax. And then it's asking for frequency. And then what do you want your city? And it actually says Toronto to sound like, but really, I think we all probably want our cities to sound in a similar way. So please answer as you would like. When you step out your door, what would you like to hear? So as I said, that will be available for you to answer as we go through the evening here, and then we will revisit those answers at the end. Okay, so No More Noise Toronto is a grassroots collaborative effort. You can see the organizations and groups that I work with and that I collaborate with. It's been a journey, and I'm very thankful for this. We are learning as we go. I'm trying new things, but the support from people has been amazing. It's been great. And this picture was taken from an event that we had in person, where on the left is Daniela Levy-Pinto, who is a pedestrian advocate who's blind, and then we have Councillor Lily Cheng, who's on the Toronto Police Services Board, myself, and then Dr. Oiamo, who has just been a steadfast collaborator the whole way through. So I am lucky enough that this campaign started to get momentum when it was selected for a short documentary. And this is with Hot Docs and Citizen Minutes. And so Hot Docs, for those of you who don't know, is an organization that produces documentaries. And Citizen Minutes is a special feature of that, where they talk about ordinary citizens doing extraordinary things. And this is the perfect introduction to what No More Noise Toronto is all about. So without further ado, I'm just going to manage a couple screens. I'm going to minimize this, and I'm going to bring this over, and I'm going to make that bigger. And Arline, I'm going to look for a thumbs up from you to make sure that you can hear sound. Yeah, there we go. It's coming. Thank you.
In 2014, a news bulletin came out that shocked the world. The CIA was using Britney Spears for torture. Yes, That Britney Spears. Well, Britney's music to be precise, along with Barney the Dinosaur and the Meow Mix theme song. Prisoners were forced to listen to ear-splitting, distorted music for hours and sometimes days on end. The music became noise, unwanted sound, and it was inescapable. Noise pollution is a problem in Toronto, too. And the biggest culprit, traffic.
I read a report that said noise cannot be mitigated at the source, and my response to that is bullshit.
This is Ingrid. She hasn't slept properly in years, thanks to noise from modified car mufflers.
I was lying in bed one night, and I was woken up by a motorcycle at 3:30 in the morning. And then I heard it for 10 minutes. That was 7 kilometers away. And I heard that one engine the whole time. Each one of those light pink lines are basically times that I was woken up by illegal mufflers. If I got woken up by this one engine, how many other people just got woken up by that one engine? What happens when there's thousands of them?
In Ontario, it's illegal to modify your car muffler to make it louder, but that hasn't stopped many people.
The problem is the system doesn't work. There's not enough enforcement of the existing noise bylaws. There isn't enough teeth to them. In the city of Toronto, the bylaw officers are trained with the sound meters, but they can't stop a vehicle. So they need the police to stop the vehicle. Whose department is it? It's really easy to do this.
Noise pollution is bad for your health. When people are exposed to noise levels above 55 decibels for extended periods of time, they have an increased risk of developing heart disease, diabetes, and even strokes.
Those already struggling the most in society are also exposed to the higher volumes of traffic noise and being burdened with the highest levels of health effects from traffic noise exposure as well.
Our cities are getting more dense. They will get more loud unless we make changes.
The noise bylaw was due for a review in 2020, but was postponed due to the pandemic. Ingrid has been waiting 3 years.
There's a noise bylaw review in the spring, and I want to make my voice heard.
Noise is not only a health and equity issue, it's also a safety one.
Okay. Verchelinsky? Not every guide dog can work in a city like Toronto. The noise, the crowds definitely take a toll on them. I've been in Toronto since 2006. I chose Toronto because it's a fairly accessible city for someone who's blind. It has changed. I've had close calls with drivers making right turns on a red light. They were not paying attention. I was trying to cross with my dog, and suddenly I felt the dog pulling me back. I heard a car turning and speeding in front of me. I navigate relying on my hearing, so when there's noise, it actually can muffle the cues that I have to navigate.
Ingrid and Daniela aren't the only ones who hate noise. When the city asked for the public's opinion, they received 900 emails in 1 month.
I hate car honking. I hate, sirens blaring. Jolts you sometimes.
I don't love hearing the cars or the people or the yelling.
An ambulance or a police car or a fire truck every single day or a helicopter.
It's just the constant sound.
City councillors are also frustrated.
I did move motions on behalf of people that are very concerned, awake at 2 and 3 and 4 in the middle of the night. They made requests, they phoned 311, they called my office, they wrote, I sent everything in, I made motions, and there is an enforcement blitz at Don Valley and Lakeshore, where not a single person actually lives.
The complaints about it are building and building and building, and it's not going to go away until you're really putting the full force on it.
I would say the City of Toronto acknowledges that it's a problem, but what they're willing to do about it is another question.
There's also tarts at the back. That I've been advised that there's tarts at the back if you need some sugar. And I also
What does that have to do with noise?
Frustrated by a lack of enforcement and a poor reporting system, Ingrid has made her own website to log noise reports. She plans to present her data to City Hall during the noise bylaw review.
All of these points are logged noise reports. I take measurements at people's homes, and they really are appreciative. It lets people know they aren't nuts. They're like, why is this making me so angry? Well, it's because you have over 23 noise spikes at night of over 80 decibels. I'm creating that community across the city so that when it comes time for the noise bylaws to be reviewed, we're ready.
I think the city can definitely do more.
We can let the city know how important this is.
Who makes history, one person or the masses? We need a lot of unity to change the world.
Nothing changes unless people do something. And so I'm doing something. And that's going to make change.
So apologies to the people who would be listed in the credits. I am going to just, in efforts of time, I'm going to just reduce that for the moment and bring back up my screen here. So I hope that shed a bit of a different light on how sound impacts people differently. And one of the things that I really took when I started to study noise, and it was actually a friend who forwarded me a YouTube video from Tor, and he said, we don't know enough about sound at the bedroom window. And I was like, that's my place. I'm going to see what I can do to find out more about sound at the bedroom window, because that's what was bothering me. So I started with creating a not 311 noise report. And this takes all noise reports at all times. And I called it not 311 just so that people knew they were not reporting to the city. And we have over 9,000 noise reports. And most of the results are that 90% of the noise reports are from moving vehicles. And most of them are from modified mufflers is the chief complaint there. So we are gathering more data there. And then I also take week-long measurements, and this allows me to understand peak noise events that people go through and what they have to live through. And so this is where we're starting to put numbers to what can be a very emotional argument sometimes, because noise impacts us on an emotional level and also on a mental level. So we're looking to change the conversation around noise and highlight that it's a public health issue. So somebody that has been sounding the alarm for decades is Dr. Arline Bronzaft. And I'd like to welcome her to share some of her thoughts on what, from the city that never sleeps, how is it helping people sleep a little bit more?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Am I unmuted? Yes?
You're all good. Yes.
I'm good. All right. Yes, I live in New York City, but let me also tell the people, my mother's from Toronto. And as a small child, I lived in Toronto. So my family's there and I'm here. But New York City, while it's considered a city of loud sounds and excitement, we don't say that loud sounds are all bad. For example, the ball falling on New Year's Eve is a welcome sound. Yeah. The children's voices as the characters pass them in the Thanksgiving parade, a welcome sound. And yes, this year, there were fewer roars for the Mets and the Yankees because they weren't doing as well. I think New Yorkers would have liked those roars to be louder. So when we talk about sound, sound is a physical phenomenon. It goes through the ear, It then goes to the auditory part of the brain. It's identified, but then the sound goes to the cognitive level of the brain. And that's when we decide whether it's a sound we want or is intrusive, is bothersome, and we don't want it. And then it can enter into what we call noise. There's a difference between sound and noise. Let me add, as far as hearing is concerned, even if you enjoy loud sounds, as Pete Townsend of The Who did, he loved his music, he loved his sounds. But loud sounds, even if loved, can harm the ears. So when it comes to hearing loss, even if you like sounds, and I'm not calling it noise at that point, it can still harm hearing. But let's look at what sounds that are unwanted, even lower sounds, a dripping faucet next to your bed when you're trying to fall asleep. Unwanted, intrusive sounds are stressful, and it is the stress that can then last and turn into physiological damage. And that will be addressed by the next speaker, because the literature today is plentiful that links the stress, which leads to physical damage, cardiovascular damage, and that gets people to the hospitals with illnesses. We know that that noise is harmful to physical health. My research, which started nearly 50 years ago, looked at the sound of a train intruding on children's classrooms. New York City has noisy elevated trains, but schools exposed to that noise had children who weren't doing well in class. And it took a study in which I looked at the reading scores of children exposed to trains passing their Upper Manhattan school every 4.5 minutes and compared it to children on the quiet side of the building. And by the 6th grade, the children exposed to noise were nearly a year behind in reading. That was a very dramatic finding, received lots of press. The media were definitely at the school, parents, public officials, and that study is considered a landmark study in the field. But here's the important thing, and this is what Ingrid brought up. Can we do something to stop the noise? And it turned out the Transit Authority had been developing a method to abate the noise on the tracks. And I had some contacts at the Transit Authority, and with the assistance of the parents, the community, and the public officials, the TA agreed to test out this new procedure next to the school. I then went to the Board of Ed, and they put acoustical ceilings in the classrooms. And when these two abatements were in place, the classrooms were quieter. A public official said, "Go back, Dr. Bronzaft, see to help the reading." Really? But I did a second study, and the children now on both sides of the building were reading at the same level. Guess what? There was a way to lessen the noise. And guess what? No one said, "Dr. Bronzaft, do a second study and a third study." The sound was reduced after one study, and the children's reading improved. Thus, it is not a matter of not knowing what to do. As I learned more about noise, I learned it's the will that's lacking, not the way. I could spend much more time on aircraft noise and tell you that solutions to lessen the impacts over people's homes can be arrived at. But who wants to do it? If New York City, over 40 years ago, after one study abated noise at a school, one study, I can say other studies followed with similar results. And you know what? The Federal Aviation Administration in the United States has spent $400 million to lessen noise near schools. One study triggered that off. So what I have found about noise is that not only is it harmful to our health and well-being, and even let's say you haven't yet had cardiovascular disorder, your quality of life has been diminished. My daughter and her family lives near an airport. My grandson at 14 was awakened at 5:45 in the morning. Oh, he's quite knowledgeable about noise. He's now 18. I guess he's happy he's at school most of the year, so he doesn't get awakened at that hour. My daughter cannot sit in her backyard. COVID brought some relief. She could sit in her backyard and hear birds, not airplanes. So what I am saying, our quality of life is diminished by noise. The person upstairs playing a loud TV set at 6 in the morning is bothering the neighbor. And you know how we would diminish that noise? It's called decency, respect, and kindness. If people understood how much other people are impacted by the noise, but even some people understanding might not act that way. What I find in our society is a lack of civility, and so much noise results from that. The mufflers in those cars being altered. If people really respected others, do you think they would zoom through neighborhoods like that? So I would have to say that there is really a way for much of our behavior to change. It's called humanity. We don't only need bylaws in written books. We should have bylaws that stem from humanity and caring about other people. I focus on that. I'm not going to go into it now. But basically, for my 2 studies on noise, this college professor, this researcher, became an activist. And so I have spent many years trying to make a difference. I have found that there are groups concerned as I have been, and now we're getting stronger and we're working towards lessening the noise. Let me add just one other thing. We also need to educate children about the importance of quiet and the harmful effect of noise. I'm holding up my children's book called Listen to the Raindrops. It tells the story of noise and quiet from a perspective of a mouse in rhyme. And this book is part of the curricula for lower grades of a program developed by the Department of Environmental Protection in New York City. It's called the Sound and Noise Educational Module. It consists of curricula teaching children from the lower grades to the higher grades about the importance of quiet, the danger of noise, and even enlisting them into going into their communities and working on noise problems. So education is key, groups working together. And I can talk to bylaws since I was very much involved with the updating of the New York Noise Code in 2007. I now find out that we are introducing bills to update the code in New York City. I am aiming to get the whole thing looked at again and updated as a single instrument rather than piecemeal. So I am delighted to meet with the people in Toronto. Kathy and I have spoken in the past. I've gotten to know Ingrid. I work with people in Vancouver. And what I want to say is, yes, there is a way to lessen it. Let us get on with getting the things done. The ways are there. We must get our public officials to work with us. And maybe in this case, the communities become the leaders and the public officials follow us. Thank you.
Awesome. Arline, that is music to my ears. It is 100% where we need to go. And there
Thank you.
Absolutely.
May I just read the last line of the book? Just
Sure.
the last. because
Absolutely.
I think it sums it all up.
Okay.
Moms, dads, girls, and boys join together to stop the noise so that we can, one and all, forever hear the raindrops fall.
Aw, lovely. And that's what it is when in the Mentimeter that comes up in the end, we will hear what people want Toronto to sound like. And often people say nature, and that's about hearing the raindrops fall. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Tor Oiamo, I have been so lucky to get to know Tor, and we presented a number of times together. And so I have learned so much from him. So Tor, the floor is yours for what you'd like to share about how noise impacts our health.
Well, thanks for having me. And that there's like, you can't really follow that breadth of experience and passion. Also, I tried to have some of that, but there a lot was said there. I want to pick up on the last thing though a little bit. I totally agree, and this is the part that I have not really been able to focus much on yet. This part of public education, I think that is a huge part of it. I think what I see. So you know, Ingrid, and I've talked about this before. I kind of have one foot in Canada and one foot in Norway right now, working with the public health agency in Norway on updating their national noise reduction goals. If you can imagine something like that existing here, they're setting new goals. They've already had this program in effect for 25 years, and they didn't meet their goals, but now they're reestablishing it, setting new indicators, setting new targets, new ways of measuring it, new ways of making progress to get there. But that's sort of a side note. My head is deep in the quantitative work of finishing that study, or the study that will inform that updated noise reduction program. But the point being about education, and there's a bit of a cultural difference that I notice in Canada and Norway as well. And it's, of course, cultures are different, and that's great, but I don't necessarily think Canadians value quietness less, or Americans for that matter, less than other places. But there's something where just we need to raise more awareness about this issue, and raise more awareness about the health effects. Just anecdotally, we all have a friend that's, or hopefully, I assume most of us have a friend that's a conspiracy theorist, and one of those a while ago actually posted among his many very irrational posts on Facebook a link to a very good noise study on health, and along with it posted, now they're trying to tell us that noise is going to kill you. Like, what's next? And like, who are they, is when you would ask right off the bat. But there's just this lack of appreciation, I think, for those health effects, which is in large part what I've been trying to focus on, not proving, because we know they're well established. The WHO and the 2018 review for updating the community health guidelines, amassed a really significant breadth of evidence, and with high level of confidence tells us that traffic noise has impacts on increasing the risk of ischemic heart disease. And then you sort of go down the list of sources and health outcomes. Arline mentioned a bunch of them. So that long-term exposure, whether or not we're annoyed by it doesn't seem to matter all that much in these big public health epidemiological studies. Personal perceptions don't really moderate the health effects that we see on a large scale. So I see there's been some chatter about sensitivity and annoyance in the chat. So of course, annoyance is important. It's one of the main outcomes that we look at, but we got to keep in mind that our bodies will respond even if we're not annoyed. When we're sleeping, in particular, our nervous systems will respond to sound stimuli. So I think long way back to the initial question, what are we trying to do? I think just politicians, for some reason, tend to want to see evidence in their own backyards, and that's fair enough. So part of the work I've been doing in Toronto started with Toronto Public Health, doing a large-scale noise assessment, population exposure assessment with mapping and population distributions, and then moving on into different types of health studies. Been fortunate to collaborate with Public Health Ontario and Health Canada on a few big epidemiological studies where we basically, not that it was needed, but more evidence is always good. You know, we showed that these effects, long-term effects of traffic noise exposure pretty much has the exact same dose response effect that we see in epidemiological studies from Europe, where most of them have been conducted. So I'm continuing to try and pick up those pieces, working and collaborating with different health agencies on demonstrating those health effects here, although they're already well established, because that seems to be part of what we need more of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Tor. It was really interesting. There was a session that we were in together, and you basically said that, that's our bodies are always listening. That's why alarm clocks work, and we're always on, and there's always that sensitivity. And when some people say, that we should move out of the city because it's loud, and it's like, no, we choose where we live very carefully, and we all have a right to do that. And we also have a right to a healthy environment. That was passed this year in June, that citizens have a right to a healthy environment. And that's where I think we've been told for decades, oh, don't worry about the noise, you'll get used to it. It's a sign of progress. I think the progress, going back to Arlene's point, is that the progress will actually be, yes, we do need to make some sort of sounds. We need sirens. We need to we need to have construction. We need to build homes, but can we do it quieter? Can we actually? Yeah. So let's bring in Arline here, and we're going to try and spotlight you. There you are. Excellent. So
let me
let's do a little panel discussion here. Please go ahead.
What was really remarkable about my first study in the late 70s? I did one study. People should have said, oh, we need more studies. Too often when I read academic journals, I see that they've come up with some solid research, and then they say we need more research. I'm not going to dismiss that. I'm still an academic. But New York City acted on one study. We alleviated the noise for the children in the classroom. Do we really need a study? No. If you had walked into that classroom and you would have stayed there, you would have heard the trains coming loudly by every 4.5 minutes. The teacher couldn't teach. She was stressed out. The children couldn't learn. But okay, they needed a study. One study did it. And that study was followed by other studies. So when you talk about way, let me tell you an interesting finding. The Transit Authority was not really excited about the criticisms they received, but they acted. But one of the things Transit Authority did do is they asked me to be a consultant on noise, how to abate other things in the system. I'm not an engineer. I never took a course in engineering. I helped design a quiet attraction motive for the Transit Authority. Not only was it quieter, it was longer lasting, and it saved them money. I worked with the engineers. I used my academic acumen because I look at things objectively. I come up with hypotheses, and I worked, and we came up with ways to produce a quieter system. Let me also talk about money, which seems to be a critical issue, not only in the United States, but I'm sure in Canada. When we say we need quieter aircraft over people's homes, the airlines are fighting us, and money comes up. Well, in the United States, I think second to military costs are medical costs. How many dollars are spent on people who enter hospitals with increased cardiovascular disorders because they live near airports? Literature is pretty strong on that. How much money would it have cost to ameliorate the learning in those children who are a year behind? That costs money. If you start adding up costs, you will see that by quieting things, you will have saved money. And the Transit Authority would not have asked me to be a consultant. I've been a consultant for them twice. If I was going to say, spend money and it'll be costly. For every dollar they spend to quiet things, they saved money. So I really think we have to address cost. We have to show the people that it saves money. I think we know there are ways. Look, let me tell you, the New York City Noise Code recommends that people who use construction tools try to recommend quieter tools. I possibly would say maybe we should have mandated it. There are quieter tools. Jamie Banks, who heads Quiet Communities, has said we can use quieter landscape equipment. I could sit here and list how many things that we can use that are quieter and will save money because people's health will not be impeded. And that, I think, is so important. And I agree with you, education, key. I work with students. When the Times gave me tremendous coverage 2 months ago, 4 students from California, 9th graders, asked me to help them with a noise project. I was so excited. 9th graders. I work with college students. I read the children's book to classes, 3rd and 2nd graders. And by the way, they are interested in noise. They give me their noise complaints. So I want to say there's so much we could do to demonstrate that by lowering the decibel level, one thing, we're also harming the other species of this earth. I got to give you a secret. I was a zoology major in college. Oh, now I'm talking more of how we harm not only the mammals in the waters, the paramecium are being harmed. The birds are being harmed. We are harming the other species. We have no right to do that. Yeah. So I think there are just so many things that just go beyond it's loud and it's bothersome. And you're so right. When you are stressed out, you react physiologically, lengthen that stress out period, and it's damage. So go ahead. I took too much time.
That's all good. And you know, the other thing that people, so I'm a climate action champion in the city of Toronto, and I was educated on greenhouse gas emissions. And when I say noise is related to climate change, sometimes people go, well, how is that? And I'm like, okay, as soon as somebody modifies their mufflers, they are circumventing the emission controls that were mandated by the federal government. So that's number one. And if you've walked behind a Honda Civic with one of those 4-inch pipes, you can smell it. You know that there's more gas coming out of there. The second thing is that we're not able to enjoy our public spaces. And so that's where I have a balcony and I see other balconies. You know how many people use their balconies? Next to none, because it's loud. And then there's the other thing about, what about sleeping with the windows open? We can't do that. So we turn on our air conditioning. We don't use our balconies. We come inside and turn on our air conditioning. And noise is an equity issue too, because where do the people who are unhoused live? Next to arterials, in these busy, loud places that they have no defense, and we all have no defense against sound. And so there's layers of barriers that our systems have built, and that, you know, and that's where, you know, academics and researchers and PhDs like Tor can give us that information, but we need that political will. And that's where No More Noise Toronto is coming in, because, and Toronto Noise Coalition, I never want to leave anybody out, because we've all been moving towards this, but we need to get educated and understand the issues so that we can actually speak about them, because unless we speak up, we're mute. So that's,
I do have criticism of your bylaws at the very beginning.
Yeah,
I would like you to look at the intro. Oh, you did. You sent me an email on that, so you saw that. Right up front in the preamble, it should say noise is a health issue.
Yes.
Noise is unwanted, intrusive, harmful sound. You don't have that.
Yeah.
And if you don't start out by saying it, even when the federal government introduced the Noise Control Act back in 1972 in the United States, there was an awareness that noise was a health issue. If you look at the documents that were produced by the Environmental Protection Agency's Office of Noise Abatement that came out in the late 70s, they cite studies that noise is harmful. In fact, the pamphlet says noise, a health problem.
Yeah.
I'm sad. It's sad for me to now say that the federal government of the United States has gone backwards after Reagan essentially shut down that office. So if you're going to write bylaws, I would say that at the very beginning, you better state that you are aware that noise is a health hazard, rather than say, you know, there are unreasonable sounds in the city and we have to deal with them. That doesn't work for me. And you did capture it perfectly in the email you sent me, because you copied down what New York had said. So it's not that I want to boast about New York. Notice New York is also pushed very hard.
Yeah.
You have a New Yorker on with you. I don't know if all the New Yorkers are. I do know Elaine. And we do push hard. But unless you state up front that you're aware of noise as a health hazard, I will have to cast doubt at how effective your bylaws would be in reducing it. I had a wonderful professor at Columbia University. My PhD is from Columbia University. And he said, when you read something at the beginning and it disturbs you, I don't know if you should read further, because it might not get better. And he was a famous psychologist.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Tor, I'm going to give you, so people, we're going to be going into Q&A. I'm going to toss a question towards Tor here about how he would like to see Toronto or Ontario or Canada regulate noise. And then after that, I'm going to do a little bit of a wrap up, and then we're going to go to Q&A. And then at 5 minutes to the hour or so, we will do a wrap up as well and let our lovely panelists say some final remarks. So Tor, how would you like to see Toronto, Ontario, Canada, any one of those regulate noise?
Yeah, so to Arlene's final point, and I agree wholeheartedly, it needs to be recognized that it's a health hazard. It's not just a nuisance. It's not something that, you know, we can sort of optionally deal with whenever we have the resources to do so. And I'll give the city of Toronto some credit in that respect, as you know how long this drawn out this bylaw review process has been now. But when I got involved with it in 2016, the reason I did was because they did ask Toronto Public Health to contribute to the process by sort of giving them the information about the potential health hazards of noise in the city. And then I just happened to be among the 18-20 other consulting companies that have sort of put a bid in to do this work, and I had a very different approach than they did, and that's how it all started. And what also came out of that process was the recognition that something more than this reactionary instrument that the bylaw really is necessary. We need a more global approach as well. So I think that's sort of the excitement and the challenge that you know, I enjoy, and part of working particularly now in the regulation part of it in Norway more so than here. But we know we need that global and that local approach to it. You know, we need to address noise sort of block by block, street by street, but you also need something at a higher level that can sort of provide an umbrella framework and provide some legal teeth and provide. So what happened in Canada was, you know, all this responsibility was dumped onto municipalities, right? There's really no onus on the federal or provincial government for making our cities quieter, and that's unfortunate that's how it fell out in the 70s. It doesn't necessarily need to go back up the ladder, but cities need to be given, I think, a bit more authority in providing stricter regulation by even just simply putting a decibel level on ambient noise and being able to control it that way. So I think, you know, I probably sound like a broken record. I think I say this every time I'm involved with something, but you know, we need action plans. We need higher level goals. We need to establish and understand. So this obviously gives me work to do too, but you know, we need to know what the state of exposure is in the city. How many people are excessively exposed? How is it changing from year to year? How is it going to change? So right now we're bringing a lot of new people to Canada, 500,000, I believe, in the last year or so. In the past, I don't know how that's going to shake out moving forward, but about half of those ended up staying in the GTA. You know, Toronto's population is going to keep growing very quickly. We might not be able to do a lot about existing streets and sources and noise and buildings and the way that they're constructed and the way they're oriented, but we can make a big difference moving forward by making this a priority when we're starting with the shovels in the ground, essentially. And we need that. I think we need that higher level goal and a way to measure that, to know we're actually making some progress as we move forward.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Okay. Well, we've got some results from the Mentimeter, and I've got a few closing slides. So we were at 7:47. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen again. And here we go. Share. There's a really quick way to do that, apparently, that I haven't found yet. So I'm going to bring this over, and here are going to be the results. So how do you what is your most annoying noise source? So the biggest words are the most popular responses. Construction, traffic, sirens, cars, motorcycles, honking, trucks, mufflers, and then a whole array of others. I will send these results out so that people will be able to see them. So what's your most annoying noise source? There's that answer. The next one is, I'm annoyed by noise while I'm trying to rest and relax frequently. Okay, 15 frequently, 2 rarely, 7 occasionally, and 4 is almost all the time. And I'm a 4, for the record. And then the last question is, what do you want Toronto to sound like?
Nature.
And isn't that, you know, like there's nature, peaceful, quiet. But you know what I find it interesting is there's less responses to this one than there is to this one. There's just less clutter. And so that could be either we know more about what we want, like we coalesce more around nature and peaceful, but it's also could be that maybe we just don't know as much, and it's a little harder. I did a presentation and I asked people, what do they want Toronto to sound like? And it was a little silent for a while because people didn't actually know. So interesting. Thank you so much, everyone, for playing along.
Very good.
Yeah. So gonna just go into, so Toronto is doing its noise bylaw review right now. And what we've got, oh, pardon me. So we started, as Tor was saying, he was part of the initial, he was one of the authors of the Toronto Public Health Study, How Loud is Too Loud. There was a link to that in the chat. And thank you to my 2 people in the back that are doing all of that. So that was when the current bylaw review began. In this fall, they did public consultations, and in the hot doc there, they said 900 emails were sent in a month. Well, thanks to a whole bunch of people that got involved, we sent over 2,200 emails to the city in a month. And initially, the meeting was going to be November 28th. Because of all that feedback, they pushed it to January 4th. January 11th. And so that is the day that the Economic and Community Development Committee will be reviewing the noise bylaw and the changes and the recommendations from the city. And then what comes out of that meeting gets voted on February 6th, 7th, and 8th. They generally reserve 3 days for those meetings. So it will be on one of those days that happens. So what's next? Well, today we had January 4th. Today the report dropped, and I've got a stack of paper. Well, I didn't do it all on paper. I didn't kill that many trees, but there was just so much information. So the report dropped today, which means that people today can register to speak. they can also send in emails to the city council. And so that's what we're doing is there's a group of us who are working to create email templates for people that will be shared out under one link where people can write the emails. And so there will be, it's a template, but you can modify that. And so that goes to the Economic and Community Development Committee, the mayor, and your local councillor. And you can send an email on amplified sound, on construction, on all of them. So they're all individual emails. So that window is from now until January 10th. And on January 11th is the day that we can go in and we can directly address the committee. And this is our window to influence the most change on the noise bylaw. Once it comes out of the committee level, it gets harder and harder to change. And as we said, that'll be the window there where we have less opportunity to change what the recommendations are coming out of the city, are coming out of the committee. So what can people do? Well, I really need you to send emails. So what you can do is send emails to the city councilors and the mayors. Nothing changes unless somebody does something. And then, so visit Eventbrite. Many of you were already there. So I've got a page of events that are coming up. I'm training people. I'm offering drop-in services for deputations, for how to craft your message. I want to equip people to tell their story because I do not have your lived experience. You have your lived experience. Sign up for Noise News. Go to my website, www.nomoreNoiseToronto.com. And there you can sign up for Noise News. That is the way to keep up to date on all of this. And you can also donate if you don't have, scratch that. We had over $13,000 in donations, and that funded a media campaign that some of you got to learn about what we're up to. So we always accept that through Small Change Fund is our partner for that. And lastly, what's really important is to tell your story on January 11th. Many people have said, I've emailed my counselor and nothing. I get no response. Well, here they have to listen to you. So I highly encourage you to go ahead and do that. So with that, we've got a couple questions in the Q&A. So I'm just going to bring that up here. We've got 7. So let's, a couple of them are from, I'm going to stop sharing. So we can bring up our panelists here. So it's about emergency vehicles. Let's talk about that because a lot of people mention sirens. So the question to you, Arline, is has anything done to reduce noise from emergency vehicles in New York City?
In New York City, there has been efforts have been made. There's actually a group, and I can get you in contact with them, that are trying to get the city to use the less offensive sounds that are being used in European cities. There are emergency vehicle sounds that are not as intrusive as the ones that we are employing in our city. And there is a group that's actively working on that. And they've been working with one of the hospitals. I live near a hospital, I can tell you, during COVID. And it was painful then because we knew what was happening, that people were dying and getting very ill. There are less intrusive, offensive sirens that are being employed in other cities. All you have to do is get the data from that city, how successful it has been. I don't think they'd be using them if their people were dying getting to the hospital. And the one thing I do focus on is show me the data. And I think Tor will appreciate that. There was a movie that said, show me the money. I always say, show me the data. And if there are indeed data that have shown that vehicles using less intrusive sounds are as effective in getting people to the hospitals than they would be if they were louder, then I think those should be explored, looked at, examined, and at least you could do a pilot study, which New York City is doing with noise cameras. You can always employ a pilot study to see if indeed they do their job as well as the traditional ones that are being used. So New York has not been very good on that. But is a group, and they've worked hard, and I can give you their contact information.
Fabulous. There's another question in the chat of, did New York City noise bylaws, do they intersect with the congestion pricing laws? Is there any
We haven't,
connection?
okay. The congestion pricing laws have not yet been put into effect. They're still battling that. And it's interesting you're saying that, because on a TV news show today, someone wondered if the congestion pricing laws might not lower the levels of noise. They have not, to my knowledge, entertained the discussions with the anti-noise advocates as to how noise might be lessened, or I can say increased. I'm still a researcher, I don't know. But I think we could explore that. But we haven't yet implemented, the congestion pricing laws. They're being battled today. There's been lawsuits against their being implemented. So I don't know. I have not heard of a discussion, but I think it's worth having.
Okay. I've got one more question. There's a number of questions in the chat. So thank you everyone for participating. And there's also questions in the Q&A. So I'm kind of going between the two, but I have a question that I think applies to, well, I'd like to answer from both of you. And that is, if we were to apply a decibel level across the city or something like that, like when I had this discussion with somebody the other day. And so, for example, in Toronto, they are testing motorcycles for 92 decibels at idle. We all know they purr at idle. So first of all, we need to test them at 2000 RPMs. But 85 decibels is, I think, the number that the New York noise cameras are triggered at. 85 decibels is where we lose our hearing over an extended period of time. 55 decibels is where health impacts occur. Tor, what would you, if you could recommend a decibel level? I think you referred to this in your talk here. Is there a number that you can pick, that you could say, so for all of us that are in Toronto, we want X, we want the city to enforce X number of decibels for an ambient noise level? What would that be?
Yeah, so that's, as an academic, I have to say that's a complicated question.
Yeah.
Well, it is though, because the health effects, those are based on daily averages or some weighting of daytime versus nighttime, and we penalize nighttime noise. Basically, all the studies, no matter pretty much what type of health outcome you're looking at, coalesce around 53 to 55 average decibel on your exterior wall facade over that 24-hour period. But that can really mean pretty peaceful and quiet for 23 hours, and then a medium busy road, 65, 70 decibels for like an hour, right? So it really doesn't take a whole lot to exceed that level, and it's frankly and unfortunately not realistic for a city like Toronto, or probably less so even New York or Manhattan anyway, to get anywhere near that level. I think you have to consider what the practical implications are, and I think what we're experiencing inside of our homes at the very least should be part of that conversation. And if you're getting an average noise level about 40 decibels over a 24-hour period inside your house, you're actually being disturbed. You're really living with it, and that's most of the time corresponding to something like 70 or 75 decibels on average outside. So I think a realistic sort of starting point would be, no place in the city where people live should have more than a 75 decibel average level, and that's loud. I mean, that's still it's still too loud, but it's a starting point at least. The point about the noise cameras and what should be triggered and fine in terms of like the acute short-term sound events, that's a bit of a different discussion, I think, and obviously potential damage on hearing as it happens right there should be considered. Can't say too much about that, to be honest.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Arline, what does New York do?
Well,
do you know what the noise cameras are?
Well, let me correct. 85 is no longer considered the level for hearing loss. I suggest you read some of the latest articles. I can reference them for you. That has been dropped.
Okay.
So that even, yes, 85 is too high. It can go down to 70. And as far as levels are concerned, we know much more today than when the level, for example, the 85 was established. The data today are much more plentiful and really should be used, and that to come up with appropriate levels in New York City. I am calling for a total updating of the entire New York City noise code. The last time I did this, I had success. I was very much the person who pushed for the update in 2007. We also had a mayor then that was very, very supportive of pushing for the update of the code, Mayor Bloomberg. We have since then made some modifications, like we're going after the modified mufflers. We're exploring the use of noise cameras. That's a piecemeal approach to me. If you have a sweater and it has one hole, you might sew it up, maybe even two. If it gets a third hole, you throw it away. I really think by piecemeal approach to try to update our code, you should be looking at the entire code. Our knowledge of what impacts people today happens to be greater. People can now put sensors on their windows and they can know which plane comes over at which time and how loud it is. People can use sound print. I'm friendly with the person who developed that app to find out how loud the restaurants are. People now can do that. The fact that people can now assess noise levels with apps, they can put sensors on windows, and our knowledge has shown that we have set the levels too high in the past. In New York, I would like to see the whole thing studied again. And let me add one other thing. The word didn't come up yet. Enforcement. Yes. Mayor Bloomberg got very angry at me because even though I worked with him and he had appointed me to grow NYC, when the noise code came out, I said, unless it's enforced, it's not worth the paper it's written on. Absolutely. I shouldn't have said that at the day it came out. I agree to that. The people were very upset. They did apologize to me 2 weeks later and said, no matter what laws you pass, if you don't have an agency that can enforce them, then they are not really worth the paper they're written on. So please make sure that whatever laws you pass, in New York City, we have an independent agency. We have the Department of Environmental Protection that oversees some of the laws, and we have the police looking at others. Enforcement, this is true of most cities. They pass laws, but they don't get enforced. And if they're not enforced, what can I tell you? Are they really laws? So
100%.
We need an updating. We need to talk about that. Let me also say, people have sometimes said noise in the ear of the listener. So it's noise to one. We use the reasonable person standard. You look at a normal curve. There will be some people at the extreme that are affected by every type of sound, and there'll be some people that won't be affected by any. It's the bulk in the middle. They are the ones that we have to talk about. And so we say, what would a reasonable person say about this particular sound? So recognize that we can't just say it's in the ear of the listener. We don't do that anymore. That's outdated. It's the reasonable person standard.
And that's where I go back to the sounds that are coming out of cars right now are angry, they're loud. It literally sounds, when a Harley goes by, it sounds like it's kind of belching all over my soundscape. And that is just, it reduces our quality of life. It makes me angry.
And the people said that
in
the survey. They said that to you. You saw how strong.
Yeah. Well, we are at 8:05, and I really thank everyone for participating today. This has been a big day for me. Not only did the report drop, but I had the pleasure of having this wonderful interactive session. The chat will be saved. The questions are saved. and we will do our very best to respond. But it's really busy times for No More Noise Toronto. And so that might be a little bit, but you know what just makes it, we had over 77 people attend, which just really warms my heart. And so Tor, thank you so much for your continued collaboration and support. I certainly appreciate it. And Arline, when you gave me a call and I was walking to, I don't know, I was going shopping or something, and I was like, oh, Arline Bronzaft, the lady from New York, you know, you made my day. And so thank you for being such a strong advocate, so pushing for decades before this all really, before we understood some of these health impacts. So with that, I will just say thank you to both of you. And I think I'm just going to end the meeting for all at this point and wish everybody a very good sleep and a good night. And thank you so much.
A good year.
And a good year. Happy New Year. Absolutely. All right. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night.